Okay, certainly. Thank you very much. My name is Cliff Thompson. I'm a product of 19 children. Um, my mom and dad actually, see, there were 13, and then my mom passed away, and my dad, when I was 13 years old, and my dad remarried after about a year or so, and they had five more children, plus the woman he married had one. So that made 19 of us all together. Um, I'm a candidate for the school board because I really believe that there needs to be consistency with educational understanding on the board. Um, I'm a believer that it's important to have that kind of background to understand what teachers are going through, to understand what administrators are going through, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I've actually been a classroom teacher for 17 years and then an administrator for 20 years. I'm back in the classroom now in West Contra Costa County in fifth grade, where I've been for the past 7 years. So I have about 24 years teaching experience and 20 years administrator experience. So I just think it's really important to have that kind of knowledge on the board because we are making decisions about the educational and the academic growth of kids, and that's why I'm running. Oh, and I should say I have a couple seconds left, and I should say I really wanted to give back to Oakland, and I was wondering how I could do that. And I, of course, applied for a position and never heard back, and so I applied over in West Contra Costa County, immediately picked up, and it took me 2 years of thinking about it, but I decided to run for the board back then, and I'm running again now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, sorry, Shelby, I did forget to put the thing in the chat, so I'll do it again or for this question. Second question is, as a board member, how will you improve academic outcomes for students?
Well, there are several ways that I plan to improve academic outcome for students. Number one, having been a classroom teacher, I know the kinds of things that kids need in order to grow academically. So I will be on the board to advocate for those types of things for students, number one. Number two, I've already introduced a resolution to the board to actually look at the growth of kids academically in completing their A to G requirements and also understanding reading and reading access. I'm a firm believer because, excuse me, because I grew up in an area, Orville, that did not have very many people of color. So I'm a firm believer that we have to not necessarily prioritize, but not forget the fact that there are some people who learn differently. There are some people that need a certain pedagogy necessarily, and we need to make sure that we capitalize on that so that all students have the chance to grow academically. So that resolution actually looks specifically at reading and math scores of students. And so that's what I would do to help improve the scores of those students by actually focusing on what's needed for those students to actually excel and then making sure I advocate for that throughout the entire time that I'm on the board and we're discussing academic growth.
Thank you.
Could you tell us, please, about your personal history with labor unions? And as a board member, how will you engage with union contract negotiations and also work actions such as strikes?
Okay, no problem at all. I'm really excited to always talk about my history with unions because as a teacher, of course, I was in OEA. I was a teacher in Oakland for many, many years. And so I was in OEA. I was very active in OEA. We had meetings. and I would go to those meetings. I would actually advocate for things at the school site for OEA. And then after I went into administration, of course, I couldn't be an OEA, but I was in UAOS. And I was an officer in UAOS. And so I would make sure I would advocate for things there. When I left Oakland and went to work over in West Contra Costa County, I was a building rep in West Contra Costa County. That's just a few years ago, a building rep. And so I actually, of course, represented my entire school, King Elementary, um, as the representative that would speak in behalf of our school. So I did a lot of, excuse me, a lot of work with the unions in terms of making sure that we were actually doing what we were supposed to do in order to advocate for union ideas. Now, I have reached out to Mr. Amenderes, and when we talk about, what would I do in order to work with initiatives, I've reached out to him because I feel like being on the school board does not or should not take me away from advocating for what the union needs, because I believe that if we do what's necessary for our teachers, then of course the teachers will do what's necessary for the kids. And so unfortunately, and I guess it's okay for me to say this, he didn't contact me back, but I still on the board, I still advocate for our teachers all the time. And my time is up.
Thank you. Your next question would be, will you commit to rejecting donations, endorsements, and support from privatization-linked organizations such as Families in Action and the California Charter Schools Association, for-profit corporate entities, police or prison unions, or Israeli lobbying groups? Will you publicly request that any of these groups cease campaign activities such as mailers, canvassing, etc., on your behalf?
Did we skip a question?
We did, yeah. Sorry about that.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, that was my fault.
I'm into that one next.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Myra, would you mind reading the one right before that, and we'll come back to that one?
Yeah, I'll read the one right before. Sorry, I got confused.
That's okay.
What role should unions play in creating district policy? As a board member, how would you maintain a collaborative relationship with OEA and other unions?
I think the board should always listen to everyone. And now that said, as my foundation of what should take place. So actually creating district policy, if the board doesn't listen to unions, you don't have a complete understanding of the implications of the policy. So you need to hear from all constituencies in order to make sure that you have a composite or a complete understanding of whatever policy you're trying to enact. So I think it's important for equal time to be given to unions and to other entities that want to speak to a certain, whatever that certain thing is that the board is grappling with in order to make policy around. So that's how I look at the role that should be played in creating district policy, really hearing what the implications are from our union. Now, as a board member, I would want to make sure that I have an open door policy, and I think I do, because I'm able to hear from a lot of individuals who are in the union. They talk to me about certain things. I want to make sure that door is always open so that I can hear exactly what the union is thinking. The union personnel, I should say, are thinking, and how it's going to impact what we are going to do as a unit for the entire school district. I think, in addition to that, maintaining a relationship with OEA and other unions is saying, I want to hear from you. personally saying that. I personally, Cliff Thompson, I want to hear from you. I want to know what I can do in order to advance whatever idea you have. As long as it, meets whatever the requirements are for the district, hey, let's go for it. I really think we should hear from everyone. And let me stop talking because my time is up.
Thank you. We're going to come back to that other question. I'm going to read it again for you.
Okay.
Will you commit to rejecting donations, endorsements, and support from privatization-linked organizations such as Families in Action and the California Charter School Association, for-profit corporate entities, police or prison unions, or Israeli lobbying groups? And will you publicly request that any of these groups cease campaign activities such as mailers, canvassing, etc., on your behalf?
Yes, I certainly will because number one, I don't like to be a partisan to any particular group because I'm a firm believer that when you are partisan to a specific group, what happens is that group holds that over your head, and then I almost hate to say this, but I'll use this example. Then you become a puppet for that group. And personally, I don't like to be utilized by anyone. As a matter of fact, I totally reject being utilized by anyone. And yes, I will tell people immediately, emphatically, no. If you're going to think that I'm going to be a puppet used by you, I certainly don't want your donation. I certainly don't need your donation because I believe that well, I'm a man of faith, and I believe that if something is for you, no matter what, it's going to happen on your behalf. I truly believe that. Therefore, I don't want any group, any privatization group, any public. I don't want any group to actually say, "Oh, here, I've given you your campaign, therefore I want you to do X, Y, Z." No, we don't do that. I do this for you, therefore you do this for me. I totally reject that. And speaking of the Israeli group or that whole idea, I think as a school district, we have to watch what we do because if we don't really keep our eye on the prize, we'll end up being distracted from the things that really should be our primary focus. So I would not want anything, I really don't want anything to do with any Israeli whatever, because it's taking me away from what you guys have elected me to do. You elected me to look at education and make sure our kids get a good education. And that should be my primary focus. I see that my time is up. And so I hope I answered the question sufficiently.
Thank you. Your next question, if you are responsible for hiring a new superintendent, what qualities would you look for in candidates? What should the relationship be between the board and the superintendent?
I'm going to be very candid and say, yes, I am going to be responsible for hiring the next superintendent. And I would look for a person that had several qualities. Number one, educational background. I would want that person to have site background, district background, and hopefully it would be good if they had county background. In addition to that, I would want that person to have a real good background in community participation. I would want that person it would be ideal if that person had Oakland experience, or if not Oakland, that would be primary. If not Oakland experience, of course, urban experience, because they would have to know that running a large district like Oakland requires their being informed about communities, informed with politics, informed about racial groups, safety, all of those big ideas. A new superintendent would have to be ready for that type of work. The new superintendent would have to be ready for understanding how, gosh, understanding how unions, and I'm sure a superintendent should have that because I know principals had to have it, how unions impact the work of the school district itself. Now, and I think your last question is on the relationship between the board and the superintendent. There needs to be a communicative relationship where there is shared understanding, openness, and transparency in order to make sure that what's done at the board level also gets carried out by the superintendent. And as long as you have that good relationship, the superintendent would realize that he or she needs to actually do what has the policy that has been enacted by the board.
Thank you. The next question is, do you commit to voting against any school or special education program closures? Other than closures, what are some specific ways that you can respond to possible funding shortfalls in the budget?
You know, I have to be very transparent. Voting against SPED closures, I can't say that I would commit to that because my responsibility as a board member is to look at the overall fiscal viability of the district. Now, if you said vote against SPED closures that would not allow students SPED opportunities, I would say I would vote against that for sure. But sometimes we have to go a little deeper in order to understand that, and we're speaking of SPED specifically, a SPED closure does not violate the person's SPED opportunities. If their opportunities are violated, I would certainly vote against. No way in the world would I allow a SPED opportunity to be violated. Um, again, at the board level, what you're looking at is you're looking at the fiscal viability of your entire district. So you want to make sure there are no violations in the SPED law. There are no violations in the responsibility of the teacher or the instructor at the school, no violations at district policy. You're looking at all of those things being put together and to make sure that you have a SPED program that's viable for students who have been identified and those students who are supposed to receive those services. So I think it's very important to understand that there's a difference, and I appreciate this question, but there's a difference between closing a SPED program and then not allowing students to participate in SPED. There's a big difference there. You want to make sure that your students always have the opportunity to participate in any SPED programming if they are eligible for SPED programming. Should I know my time has gone out, but should I talk about the other ways of responding to funding shortfalls?
Sure.
Okay, great. So some specific ways that I could respond to possible funding shortfalls is, like I said about the SPED thing, to actually look at where money is allocated. Now, but before you do that, you have to understand you have something called a restricted fund and an unrestricted fund. An unrestricted fund means that you can spend it on anything. And so you can actually look in those areas where unrestricted money has been allocated and see how you can reduce whatever money goes there. In the restricted fund, in terms of SPED, you cannot go in and touch that money and use it for something else other than for SPED, whatever the SPED things are. You have to use it for that. So I would look specifically at unrestricted funds and say, how can we collapse or consolidate departments in order to make sure there's more efficient use of the limited resources that we have? That's my big thing. The second thing, I would try to stay away from school sites as much as possible because my thing right now is we need to give more to school sites in order to make them more attractive so that we can lure, if I can use the word lure, let me take it away, attract more students to come to our schools in our district, because we know that your LCFF is predicated on your attendance rate, not your enrollment rate. Therefore, if students aren't attending, then of course you don't get as much money. So there are a number of things that go into play when you talk about the kinds of things you would cut if you have a funding shortfall. So I'll stop there. Thanks for allowing that time to go over. I really appreciate it.
Your next question is, what do you believe the future should look like for charter schools in Oakland? Specifically, what are your thoughts on extending property leases, sharing space on OUSD campuses through Prop 39, and transitioning charter schools to district-run schools?
That's a very interesting question, and there's a lot in that question. Number one, the state has issued mandates that we are to follow in terms of Proposition 39. So we have to follow what the state says to avoid any legal action from charter schools. Again, I want to reduce our dependency on looking at the bifurcated essential of charter schools and district run schools. And I want to look, for me as an African American man, what I want to look at is a good educational program. I think what we have done is we've allowed ourselves to reduce the conversation to just this two things, either district school or charter school. I want to make sure that we look at educational programming. What are we doing educationally to create a program that would allow all students to advance? Number one. Now, and again, number two, the Prop 39, that is a state mandate, and you have to watch, because what will happen is if we violate that state mandate, the charter school will probably try to put us in a legal situation. And in most cases, and I know a lot of folks don't want to hear this, but in most cases, if a charter school takes us to court about Prop 39, there's a good possibility we would probably lose. And so again, going back to one of the questions you asked earlier, again, that money's going to come in order to do this this legal finding. It's going to come from the unrestricted fund, which means that we're going to take money from our educational program at the school sites, which means that it's going to drain what the schools have, which means that it's going to cause the schools to look whatever, because the deferred maintenance is not going to take place. So there are a lot of things in that particular one, in that question 8. I want to make sure I got all of this. What are your thoughts on extending property leases? I'm not sure I want to extend property leases unless, again, there's a state mandate and we're not going to be held legally responsible for not extending the lease. If by chance the charter school can have an extension because of a state mandate, we have to make sure we watch that. That's why I like to always pull in our general counsel, because I want to make sure that we have dotted every I and we've crossed every T, so that we cannot be taken to court as a result of not allowing a certain thing for a charter school. I'm sorry for taking a little more time, but I want to make sure I answer all of this. Charter schools sharing spaces on campuses. Again, that I think we have, not I think, I know we have to make sure that it's not going to be a violation at the state level, so that we can be taken to court. I want to make sure that I avoid any type of legal problems that we might have, because again, that money's coming from the unrestricted fund, which means it's going to actually take away what our schools are able to have, which means we won't have that attracting we will not be able to attract students to our school, which means that it's going to lower the LCFF, which means that we won't have enough money to run our school district.
All right, and then the last question is just you have an opportunity to make any closing remarks if you'd like.
Okay, I would. First of all, I want to thank you for allowing me this time. I want to thank you because I want us, when I say us, all of us in Oakland, I want us to get a real in-depth understanding of the implications involved in all of the questions that you've asked today. Not that I'm an expert on all of this, but I do know quite a bit. I've been around the block for some 44 years, and so I have an idea of what the implications are. I've done everything from a classroom teacher up to a county coordinator, so I kind of understand this. I understand the importance of making sure that all students get the opportunity to learn. I understand the idea of going to college and I mean I've done this educational thing for quite some time, so I don't know everything, but I have to be honest, I do know quite a lot. I do want to do what's necessary to give all of our kids the opportunity to excel, to use all of their academic prowess to do whatever's needed to do post high school. So I want to make sure that we prepare them correctly. That means that you and I and everyone in Oakland, all of us adults, we're going to have to work together to make sure we create a program so that all of our students can excel and do their best, be competitive, and be a part of this growing society.
Thank you.